Welcome to the End State Program Participation webinar, a part of the EOY webinar series that we are putting out to support PSU's work with EOY. So today I'm going to talk to you about ending state program participation. There are a couple of things that we need to do in regards to state participation at the end of every year. So let's talk about those. There are two programs that every program that you have must be ended for every student that has an active program at the end of the year. The first is the homeless program. Homeless status is only good for a year, so we do end that at the end of every school year for anybody that has an active record. They will be ended with an end date of June 30th of whatever year you're working in. For this year, it is June 30th, 2026. The second one is Read to Achieve. All of our open Read to Achieve programs do need to be ended every year. They're ended in various ways depending on each student's situation, but all of them will be ended at least by the at the conclusion of summer reading camp. So again, those details vary by the status of the student. We'll be going through a couple of those here in just a minute so we can look at what that looks like. The third thing I did want to put out there is that we found an issue where whenever you have open programs for a student that has actually withdrawn from a PSU, notice I didn't say withdrawn for school, but withdrawn from the PSU, that it's causing some problems with syncing to the state edition. So our recommendation going forward is going to be that all students that are withdrawing from a PSU should have their programs ended. Now, the exception to this rule is the dropout program. The dropout program obviously is intended for someone who is dropping out of school and leaving the PSU. The other program that this would not apply to, because everything is automated, would be the CTE programs, academic programs that are assigned to students. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we are going to start recommending going forward that every student that leaves a PSU needs to have their programs ended, again, with the exception of dropout and CTE. Let's first talk about our homeless programs and exiting all of our students from the homeless program. You can see here in the graphic that in order to end a student's program, you should put an end date in for that program. If a student transfers out of a PSU, they should be ended. Also, every homeless program should be ended at the end of every school year. If they were identified as homeless all the way through the end of the school year, that end date would be June 30th of whatever that year is. The second program is the Read to Achieve that needs to be ended every year. You can see here a screenshot of that Read to Achieve program. And again, in order to end a Read to Achieve program, you do need to put in an end date. You also need to put in a program exit status and exit status reason for most situations. And there is a whole different presentation on Read to Achieve program management that I have linked in the resources that you can go through to look for all the different situations a student might be in and how to correctly code that student for that situation. Now, there will be some updates to Read to Achieve in the Infinite Campus version 2615. That's not out yet. I don't think that it will be out until sometime in May. However, we need to be aware that some things will be changing slightly based on what's coming up in there. There are changes to some fields. There's a couple of things in the drop down that will be added for program exit status and the exit status reason. You'll note in the RTA management program, that particular presentation, it already has that information in it, and you'll see some wording that says something like after update. And so you'll see what you should do with it after the update. The other, and probably the biggest thing that is changing with this new release, will be that the exit status reason will become a multi-select. And this is important because this is where all of your GCEs or your good cause exemptions are put in for a student. Typically, a student can have more than one GCE. Right now, you can only choose one. There's instructions on how to do that in our article. However, with this next release, you'll be able to select more than one, which means that you'll be able to select all the different GCEs that apply for a student. So that will be coming out in 2615. I just wanted to make you aware of those changes as they come out. Again, they're already referenced in the presentation about RTA program management. And up until that point, if you are working with Read to Achieve and trying to end all the student programs, you'll follow the instructions just as they are for right now. If it is after the update, then you would follow the instructions for after the update. And this last thing here is ending programs for withdrawing students. Again, before you go and you withdraw a student, when you receive that request for records and you go to withdraw a student, do check to see if there's any open programs that that student has, and do be sure that you close them before you release records in NCSIS to that next school. That will prevent there from being open programs floating around and ensure data integrity across the state. Now, a lot of these closures can be done in mass. You do not have to go to every single student at the end of each year and close all their homeless programs one by one. You can do them in mass. You can also do all the Read to Achieve program management in mass. So I'm going to go through this federal program update wizard, which allows you to do that. I do want to give you a warning first to tell you that even though this wizard is out there, very few people, typically only the SIS coordinators, should have access to this particular wizard. This is a very powerful wizard. It can cause data loss, data corruption if it's not used correctly. So you do want to limit tool rights. I always try to take this moment to remind people that as of right now, read-only access to wizards typically means that a user could run that wizard. So that means that no access whatsoever should be given to this wizard unless you intend for that person to use it. However, if you are going to be using it, it is a very powerful tool to be able to do very quickly this end state or end program participation that we need to do at the end of the year. There's two different types of updating that you might do. You'll see them both on the screen here. You've got one for an import file. I'm actually going to talk about that one second. That's the one that we use for Read to Achieve. But for your homeless, you can use an ad hoc filter updating tool, and that will allow you to choose all of your currently open homeless programs and add an end date to them. So the first thing that you would need to do is create an ad hoc filter. We're not going to go through how to create that ad hoc filter today, but you would create an ad hoc filter that pulls up all of the students that you would need to change something for. In this particular case, that's all of our homeless students. I'm going to flip over to our training site here, and I want to show you that I do have underneath reporting and then underneath filter designer, I have created a homeless students ad hoc filter, which I will show you here. And if you would like to pause this video, you certainly can, and take a screenshot maybe of the fields that I used. You can use other fields, obviously. I just use the very bare minimum to be able to see any students that may have an open homeless start date and end date. So these are the fields that you would use for that. I did limit it here in this next filter screen to where our homeless start date is less than or equal to today. So anybody that has a start date prior to or maybe equal to today. And either somebody whose end date is null or their end date is after today. And so those are the criteria that I'm using to pull the students that we need to have. And you can see down here in my logical expression that I have one needs to be true and either 2 or 3 needs to be true. So again, I'll pause right here. You can take a screenshot of this particular screen so you can set yours up in the same way. And again, you can do some output for this if you want to, but this is how I have mine set up right here. Now I want to show you that now when I go to student and I go to search, I'm going to go under advanced and I'm going to go down here to my save filter. I've already done this, but if I hadn't done this, I would click on select filter. I would choose the right ad hoc filter, and then I would click on search. That's going to pull up here my 4 students in Monroe High School that have open-ended homeless records. So for example, I'll click on Amy Young. You can see that she does have a homeless record in her program participation, and this one is open. You can see a start date and an end date. And so this will pull any student that has an open homeless record. So this is important because when we start to use our federal program update wizard, we need to choose just those students that we will be working with. And so now I'm going to show you how to use that program update wizard in order to end all of these particular programs. So inside of our menu right here, if you go look under student information, and if you scroll down under program administration, we do have federal state program update wizard right here. And you would click on that to open it. Of course, you can also use tool search to find this particular tool, but I just use the menu here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so we can see this a little bit better. Here, you can actually use this to edit a lot of different programs. In our case, we are using it to edit our homeless program. So I'm going to choose homeless here under select federal program. You'll see that there's 2 modes like I talked about earlier. There's import file and ad hoc filter. Right now we're going to do ad hoc filter. And you can see you can actually use it to do several different things. You can use it to add the participation, delete participation, and edit. I'm going to recommend that you never use delete participation, except if you're directed to maybe by Infinite Campus Help Desk, because you don't typically want to delete records out of your system. You may want to add participation. So at the beginning of the year, if you have a whole file full of your homeless students, you can certainly add participation this way. The only thing about doing it through ad hoc filter is every field that you want to put in has to be identical for all the students that you're doing it for. So that may or may not work for adding your homeless programs, but it will certainly work for ending your programs. And so when we go to end a program, we want to put in an end date for everybody, and it's going to be the same end date for everybody, which means I can go into edit participation right here. This will allow us to edit any open records. So when I click on next, it asks me, what is your ad hoc filter that provides me with the list of students that I need to do this for? And so in this case, I'm going to choose homeless students out of the ad hoc filter. And then I'm going to come down here, I'm going to select the field that I want to update for all of these records. Again, it's going to change every single record that's in that ad hoc filter. And so we're going to click on include field beside end date. And we're going to set the value there. So you can see here that I want to end them all on June 30th. And because I'm in 25-26, I'm doing that for this year, I'm going to put 6/30/2026. So what this will effectively do is it finds all the students in this homeless students ad hoc filter. It's going to add an end date and only an end date. And it's going to put that date in for them, so 6/30/26. This next section down here is asking you to select the actual records that you want to end. And so this, I know it has a start date and an end date down here. That's a little confusing, but what this is actually saying is anybody who has a homeless record that starts on or after this date and ends on or after this date. So is it basically open at some point during this window, then it's going to end it for you. So in here in the start date, I'm going to put 07/01/2025. That would be the beginning of this school year. And so anybody that had an open record between July 1st, 25 and today, that's actually going to be the ones that it would edit. I do want it to overwrite any existing data. So in other words, actually, if it has a start date in these are already open. So right, this ad hoc filter actually has open-ended. And so that means there shouldn't be no end date there for those students. But I'm going to go ahead and check overwrite existing data just to make sure that it does insert it for all of those students. Now, what I love best about the Federal State Program Update Wizard is that it does allow you to test what you're doing before you actually make any changes to your NCSys instance. And so that means we have this test button right here. I can click on test. It's going to download a file for me. And when it downloads this file for me, it's going to open it up right here in Excel after I clicked on it. And you can see that I actually have I have 3 that will actually be edited. First of all, you'll see up here, it says this is a test. We didn't actually make any changes. And it says, hey, I'm going to edit 3 of them, but I do have an error or a warning on one of the students that you had in this ad hoc filter. And so down here, you'll see these 3 students will be edited, but it's telling me here that my student, Warren, has no record to edit. But he did show up in my open homeless records ad hoc filter. So let's go look at Warren here to see why maybe it's telling me he has a problem. So I'm going to close this file here. I'm going to go back over to search. I'm going to search for the students. I already have them pulled up. So I'm just going to click on Warren and let's look at his program. His program, if you note, starts in October 1st, 2024. Well, if you remember, inside of the Update Wizard, I said only impact those records that start July 1st, 25 or later. And so even though Warren was in my ad hoc, it's giving me a warning to say, I'm actually not going to touch the student because his is earlier. Now, we should be ending our homeless programs every year, so you shouldn't have any students that are in this situation, but you may, especially here in this first couple of years. Our data is a little bit wonky, and so I wanted to point this out. What you can do is go one by one through these records and fix them appropriately in them as of the end of last year. If you want to do that, maybe you use the ad hoc filter in a different way to go through and find these particular students who started prior to July 1st, 2025, and use the Update Wizard to actually fix them in a different way. But it's correct. I really don't want to end the student with an end date of June 30th, 2026. So I'm going to go back to my Federal Update Wizard. Let's go over here into my recently used tools, and I'm going to go back and find the Update Wizard. Unfortunately, you do have to kind of start over again, but luckily it's not super difficult to get to where you want to be. And you can see here, I'm going to put a start date. And again, this is any student that has a start date between this date and this date. So it's all about the start date in these 2 fields. I'm going to overwrite my existing data. I've already tested it once, so now I can, if I'm comfortable with what it is, and I can, again, if I went and changed anything, I would want to test it again. But in my case, I want to go ahead and edit records. Now, if you have a bunch of records that you are changing, I do recommend that you batch queue that edit, and that means that as soon as the system has enough capacity, that it would start running that process, but it wouldn't do it until then. So I'm going to go ahead and say edit records. You'll notice that you do get another file whenever that happens, and it comes in here and it tells you I edited 3 records, these 3 students, and I didn't do anything to this record because he had an error or a warning. So if I go back and I look at these students here, I can see that Warren still has no end date. But as I go into these other students, they do have end dates here. I'll go back to Amy since we looked at Amy earlier, and you can see that she does have an end date. So that's a way you can use the update wizard in order to fix your homeless programs. Now let's talk about how to use the update wizard in order to fix your Read to Achieve programs, to end all of those at the end of the year. I'm going to kind of fly through this for a second until we get to this section here of the import file mode. I'm going to use the presentation for this particular part of it because this is a little bit more involved, and I want to show you the right steps. So when you do import file mode, you'll see that it says add/edit participation, because you can actually do either one of those things through this mode. The very first thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to create the file. And that creation of the file can be done in lots of different ways, but you can export some data that's already in Infinite Campus and then actually go through and have someone else maybe fill out that file. You can create a file from scratch. You can do it lots of different ways, but here's the qualifications of that particular file. You do not need to have specific headers or specific codes in your file. What you do need to have, however, is the values must be consistent all the way through the file. So if you mean, for example, if you're going to end with a specific GCE and it has a code inside of Infinite Campus, it doesn't have to match that code specifically. Let's just talk about maybe the Read to Achieve test. It doesn't have to match the code that's for Read to Achieve specifically, but every student that ends with Read to Achieve test needs to match each other. And in that way, you can say, okay, everybody has this in the column, you're going to input this code for them. Any file that you create does have to be a CSV or a TXT file. So you'll want to make sure that you do get it into that file before you go to import it. You will want to make sure that your file contains student numbers. It must always contain student numbers. And then your students do have to have an enrollment in the district that overlaps with this information in order to actually impact that student. So when you come in here and you're going to actually work with Read to Achieve, again, you need to select the federal program, just like we did with homeless. This time you'll choose Read to Achieve from the drop down. We will be choosing import file, and then when you click on next, you get to the program updater window. Now you do have to have import mappings for this. And for our purposes, in order to end an open Read to Achieve file, you really only need to have the Read to Achieve update file mapping. Now, you're going to want to have both of these. If you are using this wizard to manage your Read to Achieve programs, you'll want to have both. So I did include both here. But for our purposes, you really only need the Read to Achieve update file. And you will create these. So you would click on New down here, and then this is how you would fill out the import options. You name it. You say, what's the file type? I'm doing a comma delimited file. You might have a tab delimited file based on your file type. All of us will be using state ID to identify our students, and all of us will have header rows in our particular file. Now, this is different from the RTA add file import mapping. Is this one checkbox right here that says overwrite existing data. So even though this update wizard really says that it is editing your data, it's really not. It is really overwriting data that you use in your file. And that's really important to know, because you want to make sure if you have a start date, for example, start date's a required field. We'll see that in just a minute. If you have a start date, it needs to be identical to the start date that's currently in that student's Read to Achieve program. That way, when it does update or overwrite that data, it overwrites it with the same data that you currently have in the program. So that's really important to make sure that your file that you're using, if that information already exists and you don't want to change it, then it needs to match exactly. Once you have created this import mapping, you only have to do it once, and then it will exist every other time you come in here to either add or update. So once that's already there, you come in, you choose the import mapping that you want to use. In our case, we actually want to choose update file. I'm sorry, that square's in the wrong space. But we do want to choose update file, and then you're going to choose the file. And then down here, this is going to be our RT, whatever we named our file. You're going to find that file on your computer and choose that one, and then click on next. At that point, it gives you this really big, busy screen. And there are a couple of things you have to do. Number one, everything that's in red, you must fill out. So in other words, you need a column for everything that is in red. So your file must have a column for everything in red. And you're going to go through and map each one of these to a particular column in your file. Now, it does give you a sample of your file kind of up here, so you can see exactly what headers you chose. And so you can choose the correct column, the correct header name inside your drop-down list for each one of these fields. Once you have chosen those particular fields in your drop-down, then you'll see here the ones that you may want to do. Just a note, your all of your Read to Achieve program fields inside of Infinite Campus, inside of NC-SIS, they are contained in the at-risk table. So you may see this if you have exported it. Once you choose the value that you see here in your that matches whatever start date, this is the column that's in your file that matches start date, you have to click on Map Field. And what that does is it allows you to say, this is the format of the date that I'm using in my file that you're going to need to read. Or if it's another type of field, you can say, every time you see this particular value in my file, I want you to map it to this particular field inside this value inside of Infinite Campus. And so it's going to show you in the drop down every possible field for that particular, every possible value for that particular field here. So you can see you'll have to do that for each one of these that you fill out. You will want to make sure that all of your reds are filled out and that you are completing the fields that you have to do in order to end that program appropriately. So definitely an end date, more than likely a program exit reason and program exit status. This, just like all your other Update Wizard possibilities, does have a test option first. Absolutely test it first. This is a pretty complex program, and it's really good to check to make sure that you are doing the right thing before you actually import it. So you will want to test. Again, if you're doing a large number of records, then you can batch queue your test also. It will produce a file afterwards. You'll want to go in and validate to make sure you don't have any errors or warnings. If you do, you'll want to make sure that you understand why that's an error or a warning and decide whether or not you can proceed or if you need to go fix something that you currently have in your mapping. After you have examined that and you're good with everything, then you will come over here and you will either add edit records or you will batch queue that add and edit records process. And again, that will hold it until it has the resources to actually run that. So these are the two ways that you can use the Federal Update Wizard to end the two programs I talked about. Again, that's the homeless program using the ad hoc option, or your Read to Achieve using the import file option. There are much more detailed instructions for your Read to Achieve over in the Read to Achieve management presentation. So on the resources screen at the end of this section of the presentation, you will see links to a couple of different presentations RTA program management is the one that I'm referring to. So when you come into RTA program management, you'll see that at the very beginning of this particular presentation, there are a bunch of flowcharts to help you understand exactly when the Read to Achieve program needs to change and for which students it needs to change for. But if you go on down towards the bottom, there is a whole section about the Federal State Program Update Wizard and exactly how you might go through that process. And if you're going to be batch adding at several different points throughout the year, there are instructions down here for each one of those windows and exactly what you might do. So the one that I am really talking about here when we're talking about ending is down there under after RTA camp. Might be a possibility as to when you end all the open programs. Some other times you're going to end programs is just before the EOG when you are adding in all of those good cause exemptions for your students. Also inside of our presentation, we have a link to the program entry presentation. This contains all things program entry. This is one of those presentations that I'm constantly updating as we go through and have new information. So please do check that out if you get a moment. It has information actually about all of these different programs and how they are handled all the way through NC-SIS. So thank you so very much for joining me today and learning more about how to end your state programs, program participation at the end of the school year. Again, you need to end your homeless programs and your Read to Achieve programs. Also, if you have any student that is leaving your PSU, you'll need to end all of those programs except for your dropout program, and then your CTE program is automatically updated. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.